Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Elearning Champion Podcast, where we dive into the strategies, trends, and triumphs shaping the world of digital learning. In today's episode, we are going to question a very interesting aspect of our future, the ethical side of artificial intelligence in learning and development. And to talk about this at length, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, George Alyn Kinney. Hi, George.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. So, before we dive in, make sure you never miss our episode by hitting the follow button from wherever you're listening to us from. Let's learn and grow together. So, George, to start with, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. I've been in learning development for about 20 years in a variety of
Wow.
different roles, from facilitation through instructional design. I've done some coaching and leading teams. Before I got into education, I got a bachelor's in philosophy. So ethics
Wow.
has always been a passion of mine. And I also worked at Google for about a decade, of which of that time I got really interested in AI as it was developing. So
Right.
now I'm a senior manager of learning and development at T-Mobile, and I'm getting to apply in real time a lot of the things that I've learned over my career, and also just being fascinated with ethics and AI um, in my day-to-day job. So that's really great that I get to kind of pull all these things together. But all of my opinions I might talk about today, I have to say, are my own and not T-Mobile's.
Right.
Go Team Magenta. But yeah, super stoked to talk about this today.
Right. So, thank you for sharing the details. And I'm sure the decade of experience you bring has a lot of worth and value and insights for all our listeners.
Thank you.
So, So, as AI integrates into learning and development, what are the basic ethical considerations that one should think about?
Yeah, so I think the very most baseline, no matter what company you're working for, they have their own code of business conduct or corporate
Right,
values that derive your ethics. That's a great place to start. But however, most companies didn't consider AI when they were establishing their values and rules and norms and things. So there's a little bit of extra work for us to do in learning and development, especially
right,
around AI. I think like the first thing you could do is establish a core ethical guideline or core set of conduct specifically for AI and L&D. That doesn't have to be anything, that sounds hard, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I think
right,
thinking through a human-centric approach in design and implementation of learning solutions, whether they're AI or not. I think that some learning departments just kind of go for, like, I'm going to do an e-learning intervention, and they always kind of
right,
think about things the same way. Now that things are changing, it's a good time to reevaluate and think about from a very principled approach what you might do. So making up commitments to fairness, equity, inclusion. I think setting clear policies regarding data privacy or security and being transparent about everything you're doing. Generative AI specifically is still so new
right.
that I feel like we're encountering new dilemmas every day, and it's important to kind of foster a culture of ethical awareness and
Right,
continuous learning about this.
right. Yes. So, what are the biggest challenges that you've encountered so far?
Yeah, quite a few challenges. The biggest one that I hear is fears of the changing role of L&D professionals, and I think this is an
Right.
ethical challenge.
Yes.
Um, for specifically job displacement. So frankly, for my whole
Right.
career, that's been a concern. Back when I was a facilitator, people were worried that e-learning would replace facilitated learning classes, and that was true to a certain extent.
Right.
There are less onboarding classes. We rely more on e-learning. A lot of those folks became instructional designers who used to be facilitators, myself included. Uh, you just don't need as many people to create these things as you used to, like engineers and all that other stuff. It's a very real concern. Another big one that I've noticed is concerns about bias impacting fairness. through learning experiences. And this comes up through, like, that sounds very high level, but this comes up very concretely through sort of like AI divide. And what I mean when I say
Right.
that is that some companies have AI, some don't, some departments have
Correct.
AI, some don't, some individuals have established it, some haven't. And that's a big challenge in terms of ethics, because there are new capabilities that are unlocked by having access to these tools, and it has a huge impact on people's
Right.
careers, whether or not they
Yes.
have access. But personally, I worry more about over-reliance on AI. That's kind of on the flip side of that. Um,
Yes.
it's worrying because it can potentially diminish like critical thinking skills, and
Oh,
that's so important
absolutely.
to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So, when we talk about the collection and use of employee data by artificial intelligence in L&D, what are some ethical considerations to be careful about?
Yeah, well, there's several different aspects to that. That's a good question. So I think one aspect is deep fakes is a piece of employee
Yes.
data that your likeness, your picture, who you are. That one I've had to deal with very specifically as an ethical dilemma in my job, because we brought up Synthesia, which is a great platform we definitely use,
Right.
but that caused a whole series of questions from people we were sort of making into these personal avatars,
Right.
whether or not their likeness will be kept, or if we'll keep using their face long after they've left the company. All these questions. And so I think having, like I mentioned earlier, a principled approach to start with, we were able to kind of think through, well, there's the legal side of things, and signing a release
Right.
is a great first step to that. But I think also above and beyond that, letting them know like the data schedules that we might have, of saying like,
Right.
okay, we're going to get rid of this at such and such a time. We didn't used to do that for, if we had a film for new hire or something, and we had like a welcome message, there was no guarantee that we might delete that welcome message after so many years. But
Right.
with AI, because it can change the message, it's very important to give those kind of reassurances to people. But I think above and beyond that, employee data, so likeness, people are very emotional about it, but I would say it's not the most
Yes.
common one I run into. Um, it really goes around collection of data, and I think that's it's all this information that we've never had access to in the past. So
Correct.
many corporations can see exactly what you're putting into generative AI, and that includes inside of learning experiences. So that could be, if it's a module around coaching or something like that, it could be performance, or your learning styles, or your sentiments toward the company. All these like
Right.
information that people divulge without necessarily knowing that they could be seen in doing these things. So it's a worry of mine that if we're not careful about specifically blocking that information could be used, like in an environment that's meant to be training. People are supposed to make mistakes there. That's the intent.
Right.
Uh, it's my worry that data may be used for other things, and we've seen this in the past in training. I remember with Myers-Briggs. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It was one of those personality archetyping quizzes, and that used to be used at a certain time for making decisions around hiring and who might be in management or not.
Right.
So
Yes.
this is way more data than Myers-Briggs would give you, and so there's a potential for that data to be used in a way that users aren't prepared for. So I think thinking through some of these ethical considerations of how we want to approach this before we come to the problem is really important for us in learning development, specifically to think above and beyond what's required from us by IT and other sources.
Right. Interesting. Yes. So, how can learning and development professionals proactively identify and mitigate bias in AI powered tools?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we can do as L&D professionals is understand the sources of the bias. So we know that generative AI can be biased, and it's not all the
Right.
classical ways that humans have been biased in the past, right? Like if you go looking for some stock art to put inside of your learning, it's something we have to be very conscious of like, okay, we want to represent our audience well, and like provide the same level of sort of diversity of employees that you might find
Right.
in our training that you in the company. That way, no one feels left out or like it feels weird if everyone is the exact same like race and gender inside of your training, especially if you're someone who's not that race and gender. So that's
Right.
table stakes, right? Above and beyond that, a great example, I actually saw a tweet recently, or I don't know if they call them tweets anymore, but anyway, I saw a tweet where someone asked for only a yes or no response from AI for a hot question. It was, is affirmative action racist, yes or no? Uh,
Oh,
and it's a logical fallacy called a false dilemma. And the user is basically forcing the AI into a particular answer that might have
right.
more nuance than it actually should have. So
Right.
users in L&D, I'm thinking specifically for analysis, when you're going about creating a training product or evaluation on the back end of it, right? You have to be really careful not to phrase your prompts in such a way to lead to these sort of like uh, biased answers that are going to lead you
Correct.
down a road that might give you incorrect information. But I think really, like, how do we stop that? It's hard with individuals, right? So we have to think about our own training as far as how
Right.
L&D professionals are trained. But in addition to that, it's establishing internal review processes and governance to assess any kind of like possible bias before deployment. So it's kind of the classic trust but verify, right? So you trust your teams, you trust L&D professionals to make the right
Right.
decisions,
Yes.
but it's important to share and understand the prompts and the data that was used to create these things. And I think it's just like continuously monitoring AI performance for differential impact on different groups of learners. So like
Right.
you'll be able to see it on the back end too if some kind of bias is seeping into your design processes. So that could be through surveys or it could be through qualitative research. But what I'm noticing is that AI designed for particular circumstances tends to be a little bit different in how it's utilized. And I think that's something that you should keep in mind too while you're designing your training. Like for an example of that, I've noticed that AI deployed to front lines, such as in like call center or retail environment,
Right.
tends to be much more utilitarian,
Yes.
whereas in corporate roles it tends to be much more like broad based and can do all kinds of things that would be useful for career development and less about just like answering questions. So thinking through all these things beforehand, I think is very important to see some of these dilemma around bias before you reach them.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. So, how do you see the role of L&D professionals evolving ethically as AI takes on more tasks?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a day-to-day question for me. I think it's a whole new way of thinking about our jobs in learning and development. We're becoming ethical stewards who need to watch out for our
Yes.
learners in a way we always have been, right? We need to shift from a thought process of content delivery to curation and managing AI systems and focusing on
Right.
these sort of higher order human skills. And I think that's important because we have to take on that responsibility to understand how the AI tools function and their potential impact. So if
Right.
we're shifting to this new mindset, really we're stewards, less so the content developers. And so I think if we're coming at it from that stewardship mindset, we're going to be needing to think about what would be best for our learners, not only from a corporate context in terms of what's most impactful in their job,
Right.
but like the same way we always have, right? But also advocate for the fairness of practices, advocate for everyone getting fair access to AI in similar ways, teaching them how to use AI best to get the best
Correct.
answers. I'm already seeing this is that some people who have been using AI for the last 3 years, since like ChatGPT went more commercial, right?
Yes.
That those people have a huge advantage in terms of the quality of their prompts and how to use the tools in their day-to-day life. And the folks who are just adopting it, maybe they're struggling a little bit in terms of like, how do I even ask a question? How is this different from a search engine? All
Correct.
these other different things. Yeah. Uh, But yeah, focusing on developing uniquely human skills, I think, is also incredibly important that AI just can't replicate to drive the business forward. So that's also
Absolutely.
important too.
Yes. So, what are the ethical implications of using AI for evaluating employee performance and making decisions about career progression?
Yeah, I think there's always been a risk there of the misuse of assessments. And I
Right,
talked earlier about the Myers-Briggs and how that used to be used for promotions and all these things. We could potentially have the same difficulties with using AI in assessment or in personalized learning, especially when it's like a branching personalized learning kind of situation.
right,
Um, there has always been that risk there, but that could be just targeting regional differences, for example, or in learner answering questions in unconventional ways that are still correct. That if we have pre-written rubrics even that we put into AI, we may not be able to necessarily account for all those situations, especially when
right,
we're deploying these solutions to really large audiences. So really, to me, there's an ethical line between using AI for just learning recommendations, like if
hmm,
we say, kind of like Netflix, right? We see, oh, you like these kind of courses, so we're going to present to you more courses like that. I
right,
think that's how we've seen these things used in the past, versus using it for high stakes evaluative decisions. And
right,
so we could use a recommendation engine to suggest courses, uh, but is it right to have it be a gatekeeper for when an employee is ready to take a management course, for instance, and then move up
right,
through the chain? Maybe that should be more of a human decision with more qualitative factors beyond just the kind of interactions they have inside of the LMS or just the kind of
right.
courses that they're taking. So that's one thing I think about in terms of performance and how that might factor into that. You're seeing a lot more integration of tools, especially on the talent and development side of things.
Yes,
And so I'm seeing AI tools being integrated into like the talent marketplace, inside of hiring decisions, and
yes,
trying to tie that into past learner behavior. And that to me is really worrisome. There really needs to be human oversight and judgment in any kind of critical decisions, especially when it's around a job, especially when it's around key opportunities for training, even when
right.
it's informed, especially when it's informed by AI.
Yes. There was also a recent update about Skills 360 by Microsoft, which was in line of integrating skill related data into your corporate environment. So that created quite a buzz.
Yes, yeah. It's funny, as an L&D person, I'm super excited about that. It's going to make so much of our job so much easier, but
Right.
simultaneously, like you got to think ahead to what could potentially happen
Yes.
going through systems.
Right. So, considering the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, what steps should L&D professionals take to stay ahead of the ethical curve?
Yeah, so I this is something I think about a lot. I think some people frame ethics and AI as a yes or no question, and that's really not correct, right?
Correct.
You you don't have to be for or against it altogether. I think that's the wrong approach. You have to be very principled about adopting it and think critically about like not only just like the immediate impact of what AI is going to happen, but second and third order impacts of using AI for any given learning activity. I think an example of that, I was just gosh, this is going to date me, but when I was first joining the workforce, email was just being adopted, right? And
Wow.
in the workplace where I was at, and there were these sort of like grumpy people making arguments that email would be just awful, and
Yes,
we
I've
should just
heard
not.
that.
Yeah, and some of them, actually, some of these were really easy to fix. Like I remember, I had a manager who was like, "Well, what if someone accidentally emails the whole company? Not a big deal. It's super easy for IT to block that kind of thing." But like, uh, there are other considerations like, well, what if email totally destroys your productivity? And I would say that one was arguably correct, right? Like too much email can be disastrous to your productivity. Anyway, all that example to say that like we've kind of been through this sort of thing over and over again in business where we're adopting new tools that change the way we work from a past model. And I think had we been more thoughtful about how we approached email or the internet or any of these other tools, we may have come up with different decisions that would,
Right.
in the end of the day, make a better workplace for us. But just like anything else, we should be educating ourselves about AI fundamentals and emerging capabilities. Like agentic AI is definitely on the near term horizon. Some people are starting to adopt that, and thinking about like really engaging in the dialogue about AI ethics within their organizations and the broader L&D community. People in IT are already thinking about these things. How will agents interact with each other? How, like, what happens if a manager has an agent that is like running faster or than someone else's agent that's trying to get something done? Who should get the task done first? Like, or when two disagree with each other, which one should win? Like, interoperability is really important. And I think, piloting these sort of like AI implementations, especially in learning development, being the first to raise our hand and saying like, yes, we need to try that here first, helps us be a better guardian for our learners and really trying to engage with the policies and the people, with IT and HR, all these different groups working together to really have a critical eye from the start on the whole employee experience.
Right. Interesting. Wow. Okay. So finally, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on LinkedIn as George Alyn Kinney. So Alyn's my middle name, Alyn. That's the best way to reach me. You can also write me or subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. That's alyn.substack.com.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing the details for our listeners. I'm sure you'll get some inquiries and messages for sure.
Oh, great. Now I'll have to manage my email.
Yes. So, and that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the E-Learning Champion podcast. We've covered a lot today, from dilemmas and ethical sides and listening to stories from George. I'm sure everybody has a lot to take away. Thank you so much, George, for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I hope you're walking away with some actionable steps to evaluate the ethical side of AI in L&D. Remember, becoming an e-learning champion is a journey of continuous learning and sharing. If you found value in today's conversation, please do share this episode with a fellow e-learning enthusiast or a colleague. Do reach out to us on your favorite social media platforms. We love hearing from you. Until next time, take care and happy learning.